How are you?
Good. Yeah, I was trying to get in, so I was kicked out once, but that's okay.
Oh, sorry about that. I wonder. It made me do a verification code. I don't know why. Never done
Oh,
that.
possibly.
Sorry about
No, it's all right.
that. Well, probably have folks trickling in.
Excellent.
Was that spreadsheet helpful at all? I hope.
Yeah, no, it definitely gave a flavor, which is wonderful.
I'm gonna. Oh my God, I'm gonna go. Here we go. There we go, Matt.
Good morning. Happy Tuesday.
Hey, Matt. How are you?
Good.
Hey, Jack. Hey, Darcy.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing today?
Good. Oh, sorry.
Hey, Andrew. I think we'll give it just a couple more minutes and then we'll go ahead and start. All right, one more minute. And then we'll start. Has everyone had a good week?
I'm sure everybody has the same answer. Busy, right?
That's a good thing to be, I think.
I guess.
I think I'm collecting different ailments from my daughter's daycare. That's my week.
Oh no.
I'm sorry, I don't want to be a bummer, but
No, it's funny you say that. My husband woke up with pink eye the other yesterday. We went out, we visited our
Mhm.
18-month-old nephew over the weekend, and I think he picked up
Mhm.
it. So he's on quarantine because I do not want it at all. I am so lucky I didn't get it. Okay, well, it's 3 after, so I'll go ahead and get started. You all, I want to just thank Barb Cohn for being with us today. She's one of our mentors and also an expert in kind of public policy and in the startup world. So right now, Barb serves as a contractor for Xentity Corporation and recently served as the Chief Data Officer in the Colorado Department of Transportation. And Barb and I had a chance to talk about how we wanted to kind of frame this GovTalk instead of it being just an open-ended Q&A, which is certainly allowed. We're going to kind of frame this around how best to market yourself as a startup to state and local governments. That's really kind of Barb's sweet spot. And forgive me if you want to add anything, let me know. And then, of course, as you all know, tomorrow we're going to have a pitching workshop. So this is going to dovetail nicely with tomorrow's session. So you'll hear expert advice from Barb, and you're certainly welcome to ask her questions on how best to market yourself. And then tomorrow you can really kind of help work on building your pitch for a specific audience if you want to do that and participate at 2:30 tomorrow. So that's my plug for this week's kind of curriculum sessions. And then Barb, would you like everyone to kind of introduce themselves and give a brief background on their organization? Would that work?
That'd be great.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I'm just going to go through my list, and Darcy, you are first up.
Hi, I'm Darcy Holworth. I'm general counsel for Grid Matrix. We are a startup, SaaS-based, that came out of the pandemic last January. And we are providing data analytics solutions to cities and other transportation providers and monitors, basically using existing hardware that cities have in place, drawing data from that sensor, whatever type of sensor it is, and creating real-time analytics for the traffic managers.
Great.
Joe, I got you next on my list.
Sure. So I'm Joe Trapp at Third Estate, and we basically have a software tool that focuses on legal workflows to help ensure that municipal resources go into underinvested in neighborhoods to help them stabilize. So we're based out of Buffalo, New York right now, but we joined CivStart and we're looking to expand outside of New York State.
Great. Thank you.
All right, next up is Madison.
Hi, everyone. Madison Harris. I am also with Grid Matrix, like with Darcy. I'm chief of staff there. I think Darcy did a great overview of what we do, but kind of to add a little bit more color, we provide analytics to cities by leveraging their existing infrastructure, and kind of the core areas where we provide these analytics is traffic, signal performance, safety insights, and sustainability emissions.
Great. Dee, I've got you next on my list.
Sorry, do you see my turn?
Your turn.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Lee. I'm the CEO and co-founder of AI for Government. And what do? We build an integration platform for government technology. So what does it mean? And our product allows government applications to share data with each other, especially for government ERP, for financial data, allow any other government applications to sync data with ERP. Thank you.
Chris? You're
Chris
muted.
Haller, founder and CEO of Conveo. We provide a document engagement platform that solves a lot of the challenges that PDFs pose for public information and public engagement. So that's everything from early stage stakeholder collaboration to publishing interactive plans and tracking them.
Thank you, Chris. AJ?
My name is AJ Thompson. I'm the founder of Cloud Driven Solutions based out of Fort Worth, Texas. And we Provide cities and counties with modern agenda and civic meeting platforms.
Thank you, AJ. Have Devin.
Hi, everybody. My name is Devin Coleman, and I am with Beam, formerly Edquity, currently executing a rebrand that's about to go live in a week and a half. But essentially, we provide end-to-end program administration. We service higher education institutions as well as governments with cash assistance program technology, so they can get cash out quickly and equitably to people. That means everything from front-end application to case management to payments. And I'll put the link in the chat.
Thank you and congratulations. I know the rebranding has been quite a feat, but you guys are doing it beautifully.
Yes, we are officially pitching this week. And hopefully we'll land something in the next 2 weeks to announce our Series A and the rebrand.
Awesome. Matt?
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Barb, for being here today. My name is Matt Russell. I work at Reaply. Reaply has a mission of bringing the circular economy to everybody, and we do that through our software platform that takes the best components of a inventory management system and mashes it up with what Amazon looks like to make a inventory management similar to an e-shopping experience, to give people visibility and metrics on their resources to make things more discoverable, transferable, and therefore more valuable in the economy today, so that you can reuse what you have first before you go and buy something else. Thanks.
Excellent.
Jack?
Hi, I'm Jack. I'm a developer for Impera. Impera is actually shorthand for empirical energy analysis. We're a software platform that enables electric utilities and building portfolios and local governments to better manage their energy use. So we work with these municipalities and governments and analyze their electricity usage and costs, water and natural gas, to help provide some energy usage insights for them.
Thank you.
Awesome. Alex?
Sorry, I was on mute. Hi, Barb. I think we talked maybe last winter when we were just getting started. My name is Kozak. I'm one of the founders of a company called TrueGreen. We're sort of like a traffic digitization platform. So we do a couple different traffic management services. You know, for traffic folks, we give them remote activity management, the database on the control timing plans. You know, for there's and bus folks.
Yep.
Awesome.
Services using equal data. And we're very excited to talk to you again. So thanks for having us.
Thanks, Alex. You were cutting out in and out, so sorry if I didn't hear everything.
Oh, it's okay. Thanks.
And everyone knows Nick, but I want to give you the floor if you want to introduce yourself or say something, Nick. You're welcome to. Okay. All right. Well, just a reminder, this is recorded and then will be available to folks who couldn't attend, or if anyone wants to rewatch this later on, we'll have it available on our Babele platform for you all. And I will go ahead and let Barbara take it from there.
Great. Thanks, Jessica. Thanks, Nick, for having me. I'm just going to lead in with a few, a small discussion, and then I'm just going to break it open because I think the question and answers is really valuable. Just to give you a little more of my background, I did work for the city and state for, in New York for quite a long time. I was direct report. I did policy. I'm a policy wonk. I'm a lawyer by training, not a technician by training. So I really look at things holistically, and I worked for directly for Governor Pataki, Mayor Bloomberg, and Governor Cuomo. And then I came out to Denver and I stood up the chief data office at the Colorado Department of Transportation. And now I'm working for on a couple contracts for multiple federal agencies. I was operational. I was in Health and Human Services. I understand transportation. I also was the executive deputy in a very large agency in New York State. So I understand operations. I also understand policy and implementation. And I understand the folks who work in government, which is really one of the most important things. So basically, we do have a lot in common because like you, chief data officer, and I was the first chief data officer for New York State. I stood up the open data platform, which received national recognition. Many of the initiatives I worked on were perceived as intractable problems, but I usually had a small but very mighty team, and we were always successful. It took a long, it wasn't an overnight success, whether it was shepherding in an interoperability initiative for Mayor Bloomberg for optimizing case management, or even standing up open data and standing up a chief data office. But again, as a chief data officer, it is, even though I was working within government, it is akin to a startup because I very much understand what you're trying to do. This isn't the first time folks in government have been approached by saying, I'm here to help. I'm here to address your needs. Just because I say, here I am, let's get going, that's not happening. So I really did have to earn the trust. So a few key points where I just really wanted to start is you really need to respect and understand the people that are working within government, acknowledge their depth of experience, and do your research, do your homework, understand the landscape in totality as much as you can. Right now, there's just too much information that's readily accessible for someone not to understand the landscape. Understand the environment and understand the issues. And people, not tech, really drive innovation in government. Business leads, tech enables. It's about the business needs. It's the boots on the ground. You have to understand human-centered design. Meet the people where they are. Reimagine it from the user perspective. Ask the right questions. Reframe the issues. Don't use jargon. There are a lot of people, I'm going to transform, I'm going to do data governance, et cetera. This is jargon to a lot of folks. Be direct. Find the champions for buy-in. Don't start in the hardest places. And remember, it's a journey. This isn't something that, again, here I am, I'm going to solve your issue, a long-standing issue that may have been decades in the making, or it may be an issue because of the current legacy systems of government. So again, it's about the people. And frame your product as a specific solution to a specific problem, rather than just showing off your product. So I've often considered myself more of a catalyst, a strategist, and an innovator, and yes, a marketer. I am promoting and I am facilitating. I am promoting the use of data as a chief data officer for moving data from, instead of good, from producer to consumer. There's a community of suppliers and a community of users. So it's really a communications plan, understanding the landscape. Whether you're focused, a lot of you are focused on either government workflow, health and human services, infrastructure, transportation, public safety, justice, revenue, finance, citizen engagement, community and economic development. The folks in CivStart really run the gamut and are across the board. But what does your business do? Lay the foundation. Who are your customers? What are your core competencies? Which agencies need what you provide? Now, do you have case studies? What are the governments, locals, localities, even from the smallest hamlets, maybe that are using your product, have tested your product? What sets you apart from your competition? Know your competition really, really well. And also examine any strategic plans that the agencies you're approaching have. What are their long-term goals, their objectives? When you're doing a demo, don't start with your product. Start with the bigger picture and figure out what the current processes are for managing. Meet your customer where they are. I remember vendors would come into New York State, notwithstanding that a ton of information was accessible, downloadable, and they'd all of a sudden show us a demo using Michigan. Well, we weren't Michigan. I have to tell you, many of those conversations were cut short at the beginning because they didn't meet us where we were and that we couldn't relate to it. Kick off a demo by asking, or before it, ask the right questions in terms of how are you currently managing this process? What type of inefficiencies do you see? Are there any initiatives that you've tried to address this issue? but get them to feel the pain of the current processes and to see there's a problem. And then once that becomes clear, then you could focus on your demo. There's a great book that came out, and it's only out for about a month, and many of you may have heard of it, Axios, Jim Vanderheide, Mike Allen, and Roy Schwartz. It's called Smart Brevity. It's a super quick read, but it talks about how to also do presentations, right? Grab people with visuals and the words you choose. Be direct, whether it's in the art, design, the language. Create a hierarchy to guide that intended audience, and make sure the most important visuals capture the reader and offer context. And again, be respectful of your audience. Abstract, clutter, jargon, confusion are really the enemy. It's really great for presentations. And you'll notice that in some of the blogging, et cetera, it says 980 words, 4-minute read. If you want something more, you go deeper. So that was a super quick overview and introduction, but it is about the people. It's about understanding the issue. So, and it's also about collaboration. You know, there's a cohort at Civ Start, and reaching out to each other is also a great thing, and they have a great forum for that. So I'll stop right now and pause to field any questions you might have. Any issues you've come across, any areas with which you're struggling. Marketing sometimes is not in the forefront of what you're doing. It's about the focus, the technology to solving the issues. But marketing or promoting the solution is really important.
Joe,
I have a quick question.
oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. This is Darcy. I just have a quick question. When you say you meet your customer where they are, that makes sense. If you have, say you have a deployment of your product in a city like New York, and then are talking to, a much smaller city, are you thinking like you want to be able to show that product and how it works in a city similar, or would be more just understanding the differences between the two and sort of tailoring the presentation to show why one, here's the deployment currently in place, but this is how it could be used by your city? Even though
yes. Yeah, no, absolutely, Darcy. So if you're going to like a city like New York, and let's say then you're going just to a small town, in wherever it is, or just take in New York, if you're going to like a town like Minerva versus New York City, the needs are different. They truly are. There might be similarities, but it's like anything else. If you're purchasing a product, when you go into any store or any place, you want people to understand what your needs are. And I think that creates that connection. Now you could show that, but in today's, with so much available today out in the open, I think you do a simulation for the different location. So, I mean, you could see, especially in transportation for traffic, et cetera, there's a wealth of information out there. Or do a proxy. We may not have yours exactly, but we think you're about the size, et cetera. So instead of doing it for 8 million people with, thousands of traffic signals, et cetera, we're looking at something that's similar and speak to them, because if it doesn't resonate with them, they're just not going to remember.
Joe, I saw your hand up first, and then we'll go to Matt.
Sure. Hi, Barb. Nice to chat with you again. Wanted to bring up, because we're kind of in the code enforcement and legal space, and we're automations there, we've noticed difficulties with cross-departmental collaboration. So like in some municipalities, the code enforcement really wants this, but the law department's dragging their feet, and vice versa. And so I was wondering if you had any thoughts on how companies that have to engage in cross-departmental collaboration can help from the outside smooth things along to get things moving forward.
That's a great question. Data sharing is just not something that's common enough. Even when I was with Bloomberg, the key was to help really optimize care for individuals. So if someone was coming from, it was in a homeless shelter, the agencies didn't have visibility into what other services they were getting. This sounds like it should be mom and apple pie and a great idea, but it was really hard and it took time. So what I would recommend is we found the champion who would benefit the most, that agency, and who also had the most gravitas to try to bring others on, because it's not going to be a vendor, an outside person that's going to be able to shepherd that in most places. It has to come from within. So you have to find that person who is a champion of this, who gets it, who understands the value of it to bring. And then you're the enabler, remember, you're how it's going to happen, but you definitely need someone inside, because when it comes to across agencies, that also depends upon relationships. Even people within agencies have a difficult time, even within the same agency, for units to speak with each other, let alone going across agencies, particularly, health and human services, et cetera. So you really have to find those targeted individuals that will say, here's the issue, here's the problem, and we've come across this great solution to pilot.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
I'll just go ahead and jump in here. Barb, thanks so much. I appreciate the bullet points from earlier. You mentioned being clear and direct on what you do, and then who are your customers and case studies. You also mentioned earlier that there was an example of someone who talked to you about Michigan, but you're not Michigan and you want to meet people where they are. I'm curious if you'd be willing to share a story about a procurement or a software specifically that really stands out in your mind as, man, these guys just did everything right, or gals, or whoever did everything right when they did their pitching and walked you through everything to get to a procurement standpoint.
Wow. Sure. It's in the early days of open data, we used Socrata, but it was a sole source. But we did have choices of CCAN, DCAN, OpenGov, and some others. But Socrata was fairly young at the time, but they understood New York, right? They understood we didn't have developers. We needed a turnkey solution. And so we were able to sole source everything. And that helps a lot. And I just have to preface this. I am not a procurement expert. I never wanted to be. I left that to the folks who that's all they did, because I just needed their help and I went to the experts if I needed something, because it is a daunting thing, as you guys well know. But they totally got where we want to be. They understood the vision, how to get there, and everything was focused on, every demo, et cetera, was focused on us, was focused on New York State. And they did mock-ups, et cetera. They spent a lot of the time on it. And, it wasn't just a plug and play. And they did a great job. It's the same with, I think Esri does a great job also. And I'm not here to plug anything. I'm just here for folks that I've had contact with from a geospatial perspective. And I think one important thing for everyone is the visuals make a huge difference. Most folks don't see data. They don't see the lines of data, et cetera. Most policymakers, most business folks, because remember, you need to get the business people on board. This is not an IT issue. So if the business folks understand it, and I would use visuals, I would use geospatial, because people remember that.
Thanks so much.
Chris?
Yeah, thanks. I just heard you say or talk about or mention pilots. Could you speak a little bit to how you've seen them used, how they're successfully structured? Anything you can kind of talk about how that works as sort of a first step?
Sure. Again, I'm not an expert, and every jurisdiction has different rules. In one area, I wasn't even allowed to pilot anything because then it would disqualify a vendor. So you have to really, from a legal perspective, understand the rules of engagement from a procurement. But if it's possible to do even just something small, so people could test it out and demo it, and and get the folks using it, before, and then if they go to procurement, it's still equal standing, that's great. Or if you can't do that, then pilot test it somewhere else just to get user feedback. You know, it doesn't matter who, but the folks who develop it, the QA and the feedback loop should be folks who are using it. So if you can't use it because of procurement rules, find another test group to really, you know, bang on it and understand it. You know, that's similarly situated, but you don't want to disqualify yourself from procurement.
Makes sense. Thank you.
I had a question. I don't think I saw another hand up. I saw a question about, you know, you said finding champions for buying. And I'm curious to understand a bit more like what types of champions are out there. Are there champions within these public organizations, or are they, you know, on the private side, but already have existing relationships with these cities? So curious to understand what types of champions are out there, and when have you seen maybe an example of where that's made the difference in bringing in like a new technology, or say starting a new pilot, or being open to, you know, a new vendor coming into the city?
Sure. You know, it's, I think both. I think people who've worked with government can point you in the right direction so you can create those relationships. And even if you can't demo, to find someone who will listen to you, who will then go to a full RFP, or you could also sub for somebody. But I think that there are a lot of open-minded people. They just don't know what the potential is and what exists. And so I think if you find someone, even with our homeless initiative, you know, back when, you know, I found folks who were just willing, they had the openness and the creativity and the curiosity to really challenge, as Jessica named this, challenged entrenched thinking, because there are a lot of folks who, you know, they've been doing stuff all along, and that's fine. But we've always found there's some people who are just like, I just need to do this. And if they're at a certain level and you can get them, even if it's for the smallest thing, it actually, it's the proof of concept that happens, and then they go forward. So I think it's really important just to, you know, try to find those people, whether through others' experience, to say, you know, Jeff over here, he would be open. Again, there's procurement rules, et cetera. So it all depends. But I think don't start with the hardest things first. You have to go in, you know, and find those people who will support it, who will get it. And again, it's not because people don't want to. They may not be aware of the potential. You know, we have to remember we work in this space, and that's why I think visuals are really, really important. And anything that you can put on your website, I know there's proprietary, et cetera. You don't want to put too much necessarily, but if someone can even see something on the website that speaks to them, I think that's really helpful.
Okay, thanks.
Me, I see your hand up.
All right, I'll jump in. So when we work in the data space, and one of many questions occur frequently, especially data security and compliance. Do you think you can actually share any best practices for like startup companies, how to deal with data security and compliance?
Sure. You know, one, I would read up on, you know, any of the requirements, whether it's federal, state, and, you know, in terms of, and make sure, and this has happened, even in RFPs that were sent out, folks were asked to address the securities. What are they doing? They're like, oh, we have top security. Well, that's not sufficient. Is it ISO? Is it NIST, et cetera? I think security these days is front and center. When we did the initiatives even for data sharing in New York, I had the attorneys at the very, very beginning. We didn't do it on the back end. We did everything at the front end as we were creating it, because we didn't want to get to the end and say, well, the attorneys don't agree. There's the security is not sufficient enough. And we just spent a year and a half, 2 years on an initiative that's not going to go anywhere, because they do have the power to just say no, and whether it's justified or not. So I would address and I would ensure, depending upon what you're doing with the data and what type of data it is, you address those at the outset, and you build in that functionality. Go to the strictest. You could always lessen it, but I would just don't assume, and make that one of your top, you know, requests and requirements when you're speaking with folks. And the same, bring those attorneys in, you know, early on, You just don't want to have someone midway just saying no.
Thank you.
Devin, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes. Question for you, just generally speaking, when thinking about the CDO audience, what are the best marketing tools in your mind? Of course, word of mouth with, fellow colleagues, maybe in similar size cities. I'm sure that's always the most trusted source on deciding whether or not to work with a vendor. But are there particular conferences or outlets, industry magazines or places that you look and in more of the seeking out of vendors?
I actually didn't seek out vendors. They usually came to us. So, I'm not, it's not my job from a CDO perspective to seek out vendors. We look at the issues and then, then potentially the chief technology officer, or we look around to see, one, we look internally, what can we leverage? Because governments don't have oftentimes enough resources. So we're like, okay, what are we going to leverage? And we were at Colorado Department of Transportation from a geospatial. They were the 11th customer of Esri. They had Esri products, so we won't come in and say, hey, get rid of all those products. So we want to leverage governance structures that they have, and we want to leverage their technology. That doesn't mean you can't bring new technology in. We also stood up a data lake in the Google Cloud platform, and that was agnostic. So when people want to do data analytics, we didn't prescribe any, but then it shifts over. The state has a lot of, you can't just unilaterally say, I want to have X, I want to have Tableau, I want to have Click, etc. So it was really based upon, we built it so it was agnostic to product, and so that people could get the best product they need for those purposes. But sometimes it was out of our hands, and we just, it's resources. And oftentimes in state governments now, the IT is separated from the agency, and that has created different types of issues. So whereas when they were bundled before, it was a little easier to move forward, and sometimes we just did. Now, depending upon the structure of the governance, agencies may not be able to make decisions unilaterally.
Makes sense.
Tony, I saw your hand up.
Yeah. Hey, Barb, how are you doing?
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing all right. So here's a question I have. Okay, so if I say I'm a startup and I'm reaching out to you, what is an effective way to actually communicate to you? I don't know you. Let's say I don't know you, but I'm familiar with the issues that you're tackling. Like you're like you said, like you're focused on the issues, not really focused on like going out and procuring technologies, and you're evaluating what you currently have. But if I'm a savvy vendor, I've done my research and noticed that there's a gap of somewhere within your community, and so I reach out to you. What's the language? What's some successful approaches you've seen from the vendors that have reached out to you to get to that meeting, so you can have a discussion around their technology?
That's a great point. I don't know if I'm unusual or not, but I would take phone calls, and I actually do read all my emails. A lot of people don't, but I think in that email, again, I think smart brevity, the book's pretty good. It's because you want to capture my attention right away, and it actually structures how to do an email, the topic, then why it matters to me. And go for that. You've done your analysis, James, and so you go for that gap. And I've definitely taken meetings of folks. And even if I wasn't the subject matter expert for that, I saw the opportunity, then I would bring in, let's say, the head of maintenance and say, we should listen to this, check this out. Is what this individual is providing as a solution, is this a big issue for us? And what do you think of the solution? Have we tried it or not? And can we do this? So I would bring in the other people in the agency, again, separate from procurement rules, et cetera. But I think it's like anything else. You want to grab my attention with in very short term, why should I care about this? Why does it matter to me? And if you've done your homework, if it's for situational awareness or it's for predictive modeling, and I'm going to say because I can understand where my pavement is cracking before it's cracking, or I only have limited resources for inspectors, and this is going to help, it could pique my interest. And then I would bring in the subject matter experts.
And actually, just really quickly, to follow up on that question, and if I'm reaching out and I'm talking to, let's say I reach out to you and you're like, okay, like, I don't need this right now, or this is not something that we need right now. But I also reach out to the CTO, or I reach out to other people within the agencies or departments or whatever, and they come back and they want to meet and discuss and they want to implement it, but you just said you didn't need it at that time. Does that create some type of conflict between or some type of or some resentment towards the vendor that you might have because you felt like they went around you a little bit? Like, there's a way, does that happen sometimes?
I have no doubt it happens.
Okay.
I have never, to me, I'm like, it doesn't matter to me, if they're more of the expert. I don't see how a vendor could even understand the internal culture and the workings and going unless you really work inside. Like, I wouldn't know that, you and Sarah don't get along. Well, let's just say, right? Unless I work there. Right. So I don't know if I would pitch something to you and if you said, no, I go to Sarah or Nick, but I'm sure it happens. But I think by doing the homework, you try to get a sense, or you invite a couple of people to the meeting. So maybe it's not just Barb, but maybe it's, to several people. So you get them all at once. That could be one way of approaching that.
Yeah, that's a good approach. Email multiple people together instead of just like one and reach out. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have not seen anyone else with hand raised and no questions in the chat. Does anyone else have more questions for Barb while we've got her here?
Any issues you've come across so far? Anyone? Everything's been going pretty smoothly?
Well, I actually, Barbara, I have a New York more centric question. So as part of doing CivStart, we've really learned a lot about cooperative buying and stuff like that out in the West, especially down in Texas. The state has its own cooperative buying. That's not something I really see in New York, and maybe that's something that you saw down in the city, and maybe that's something you have a different perspective on now that you're out in the West. And I'm kind of curious on your thoughts on the cooperative buying. I
do not have any information on that.
Okay.
Usually I actually didn't get involved in most of that. I was on the front end, whether it's in a pitch but from when it came to the procurement, that it was fairly separated in New York for a whole host of reasons. You can understand it was a totally different agency. They were pretty strict on everything.
Okay. That's pretty much what I had. Thanks. I'll follow up with you separately on some other stuff.
So I guess I would just really emphasize is really understand the landscape. And even a lot of folks, even within CivStart, right, the cohort, you might be focusing on the larger areas, whether it's transportation, infrastructure, community engagement. I would also just understand what the competition is, really, and understand what makes your product unique. Because I would stay away from buzzwords like transformation, et cetera. That it doesn't mean anything. It was used a lot, and it's probably overused. So think of how think of your presentations. Who the folks are, and again, I've seen great products. Everyone speaks about change management. We created a wildfire app in the Colorado Department of Transportation. And it was a dashboard. We didn't need change management because it was created the right way. People were like, yes, and they used it. If you have to do change management and you have to do it like for a long time, maybe you didn't get the user experience right.
Well, and actually on that, that's one of the interesting problems we had. So one entity had to create a UI, which we have, but in our experience that the folks on the ground, the lawyers and the municipal inspectors didn't want to learn a new system. So we just said, you're getting a printout every day. We can deploy technology. And I think NE has the same kind of thing where you don't have a UI, you can just deploy it and it changes whatever interface you're using, be it building blocks or something else. But then when we try to talk to the higher end folks, they're like, oh, but we want to see a demo. We want to see this. We're like, well, the lower end folks said they didn't want it. The higher end folks want this like very vanilla traditional demo. And we weren't sure like their algorithms, their code, they're you can't see them in the same way as a traditional, like showing you Telemy's building blocks or something. So I'm wondering if you had thoughts on that.
I was always a great tester because I was always able to give the feedback, because if I could use it, then most people could use it. Truthfully, if it were intuitive. And that's why you need to find the folks who have some level of authority. And that's just the way it works. In New York, we were a very mandated type of environment. So when we said just use it, people used it. There's pluses and minuses. In Colorado, it's a very different culture. So, things aren't, that's why you really have to, really understand, but very direct and very precise in how you promote your product and exactly what is it you're trying to solve. That's really, really important.
Understood. Thank you.
I do have one little, I think it's a question. Let's see if it's a question. So would you recommend, so say you're working with already, like, let's say a vendor or consultancy or whatever, is it ideal, especially for startups that are trying to build their brand, trying to build awareness of what they're doing, that it's ideal for them to, if they can form a partnership with someone you're already working with, does that carry any weight to working with your community? So like you brought up Esri, say my company we use Esri, or we add value to what Esri is doing, that also like that can it can elevate something within your community. If we basically used Esri as a way to get into your community, is that a winning formula, basically using someone that's already in your community?
Yeah, it could very well be. One, you have to create those partnerships, but two, if you could leverage those resources and build upon it. And, oftentimes, even with Colorado Department of Transportation, and it's becoming more commonplace now, as opposed to like 10 years back where things were pretty closed. A lot of the questions that folks ask, can you integrate seamlessly? Because they're not going to buy, something brand new that cannot integrate, with what they have. So if you could leverage what they have, integrate seamlessly, it's much better. And yeah, some people say I'm a Google partner, I'm an Esri partner, AWS. So, I mean, even where I am right now, we're subs for some, larger consulting companies.
Thank you.
I'll jump right in.
Sure.
Barb, can you talk about, so as CDO in New York and Colorado, what were some of the biggest like technical challenges that you faced, and you think that, oh, I wish actually some company provides a solution to fix this problem? Do you mind actually sharing a little more on that?
Sure. It's funny because the role of the chief data officer is evolving over the years. It was, used to be just like the DAMA handbook. I was much more iterative. And when you've seen one CDO, you've seen one. I'm very atypical when it comes to that. I'm not a big fan of enterprise, solutions, because it just signals to me it's going to take a really long time and people don't have the appetite for it. That's why we usually do targeted approaches and really small, initiative to show. I was all about, and this fits with what, where you're headed, AI for government. I think it's upskilling data literacy. And I think, I neglected to chat about that at the very beginning. I think it's the critical thinking. It's becoming more prominent now, but again, why would the business folks have done this? Remember, they didn't have access to data. Even 10 years ago, I never looked at spreadsheets, et cetera. I had to call somebody, right? So now we're into more self-service, and that's where the dashboards come in. But I find the most exciting thing about Chief Data Office is, I don't have to have all the data perfect. One of my core data sets, if I'm using 10 of the data sets 90% of the time, that's where I'm going to focus. That's where I'm going to focus in terms of my data quality, my metadata, et cetera. Also, what third-party apps? We do a lot with third-party apps, bringing in other information that we don't have. How can I get that information and starting to do mashups? So I think upskilling for data literacy, but I think the analytics, because everything we did, even in the Department of Transportation, I want to optimize what I'm doing. How do I do it? And where do I want to be? Not in 2025, but where do I want to be in 2035? That's where some of those strategic plans are coming in. And from the federal perspective, there's a federal data strategy, and you'll see a lot of federal agencies that have their data strategies online. Again, it's super high level, but start focusing in and read as much as you can about that. But, to me, the analytics is really, that's really what I got most excited about, because that really does, from a public policy agenda, that changes things. And you're bringing information to people they didn't have access to prior to that.
Thank you.
Welcome.
We have time for probably 1 or 2 more questions if anyone else wants to jump in.
I have a quick question, Barb. I was curious, I think this might be applicable both to CivStart and to some of the startups in the group, but I'm curious to know about if you've had any experience with regional collaboration in terms of technology procurement or data strategy, and what your experience with that has been like.
It's getting better, I think. I think it's been as difficult as agencies within the same state sharing information. It depends how the regions are set up. In New York, we had 64 counties. I think in Colorado, there are 64 counties too. We've been here for 4 years, so I'm pretty sure about that. There's a lot of issues to it, but there are regional collaborations happening, and to tap into that would be great. I haven't had experience in terms of procuring from the business side of it, but I think the sharing of information is really critical. Jurisdictions, though, again, it's not about the tech, sometimes it is, the integrations, but it's about the people, and it's building those relationships. I can't underscore it the most. There's still people that make decisions, and it's still people who, that's where you build the relationships.
I'll ask a quick question if I could. Barbara, there's a lot of money now in federal grants that's available to cities. In your experience, when those kinds of grants are out there, is that something that cities are excited about and open to? Is that just another layer? If we're talking about doing free pilots, maybe looking to those grants to help small businesses, cover the costs of those. Is that something typically that you've seen cities being open to, or is that just another layer of complexity and work that they don't want to be a part of, or does it just depend?
It all depends on the folks, but you bring up one thing I also neglected to talk about. Bloomberg's What Works Cities, right? Those targeted a lot of the smaller, medium cities, and there are a lot of initiatives. I think if you do some research on that, then because who from what areas and what cities, what leaders in those cities they're interacting with, because they publish a whole host of, you could look at LinkedIn, but if you look at the Bloomberg Philanthropies, What Works Cities, CivLab, et cetera, there'll be individuals that are currently in localities and all the way from local, state, usually those are the two. Find those names, because if they're working there, that means they're innovative thinkers, and you could tap in potentially to what they're doing, either, in terms of what their grant is currently or what their thoughts are. But those usually tap into the most innovative thinkers in the cities who, who are currently working the system. It would be a really good resource.
Thank you.
All right, we have time for one more question. Does anyone have anything while we still have Barb?
Well, I'll ask a quick one. So we mentioned the federal money. We were lucky enough to go to the NACO conference, and it seemed like everyone, and actually we just had the municipal lawyers conference for New York and for the state and local government lawyers, and everyone's talking about the federal money in its use for transportation in New York for getting rid of the highways that cut through the Black neighborhoods, and in other places just providing infrastructure that wasn't there before. Would love your thoughts on kind of if you think that we're going to be able to take these large transformational projects and actually get them done.
I always say yes, because I'm very optimistic. If I were a startup, I wouldn't start there. Again, I would start at the locals. I think, that's going to take a while. And, we're dealing with the federal government. You're dealing with crazy amounts of bureaucracy. First, the transportation agencies that have to submit what they want, proposals, et cetera. I would watch what people are submitting really carefully, for sure. But I think that's almost starting at the hardest part, because there are certain, again, words and jargon that's being used. That's this administration. Then, things change, there's something different. So I would say, believe in your product, believe in the issue, notwithstanding any types of changes in administration. If it solves something that's really important to the citizens and residents of those areas and to the agency, then that you want something, and this is really another important point. I've always created sustainable initiatives, that it didn't matter if it was under Bloomberg, it was sustained and carried forth under de Blasio and then on Adams. It didn't matter, it was Pataki, it was carried forward all the way through Andrew Cuomo. That's what you're looking for. You don't want it to be where, oh, we changed, sorry. So if you hit the right tone, that's the key. And again, I will emphasize, from the what works cities, et cetera, find those localities, don't go, you could go big at the same time, but I would focus on, locals and, states. Cities, even for open data, cities had it all over the states. They were able to, move agendas much faster than we are. I was jealous of the Chicago folks, San Francisco folks, Seattle folks, because they stood them up pretty quickly. It took us and states, it's just because they are the ears on the ground. They're the closest to the citizens. They understand it. They're usually the ones that are implementing these really hard initiatives, they're the ones who see face to face their citizens. They're the ones who get the complaints because there are too many potholes. So that would be, I guess, my last comment. I know we're out of time.
Greatly appreciated. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Barbara, so much for being with us today. Thank you, everyone, all for joining as well. Like I said at the beginning, we'll send this recording out. We'll send it to you too, Barbara, if you want to put it in your dossier or have it for fond memories of the session. And then again, just a quick reminder for tomorrow's pitch workshop that will dovetail with all of the great advice that Barbara was able to share with us today. So thank you all so much, and we'll see you later. Have a great afternoon.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.